Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dyspnea Forward 2025. My name is Félix Girard. I'm a PhD candidate in Dr. Dennis Jensen Clinical Exercise and Respiratory Physiology Lab at McGill University in Montreal, Canada. My research focuses on respiratory exercise physiology, and more specifically, breathing control and the neurophysiology of dyspnea. Since this May, I've had the chance to lead the organization of this webinar, and I'm really happy that this day has finally come. So on behalf of the organizing committee, Dr. Naomi Takimura, Dr. Rachael, and the president of the Dyspnea Society, Dr. Andrew Pinks, we'd like to tell you that we're absolutely thrilled to have you joining us. You're connecting from across North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. Some of you are starting early in the morning, others late in the evening, and many right in the middle of your day. So wherever you are, thank you for making the time. It's what makes this truly an international event. The last time the Dyspnea Society came together was in Montreal in June 2024, and today we're building on that momentum with more than 50 registered attendees, 12 speakers, moderators, organizers, and panelists, and 15 presenters, not counting the last-minute registrations. The last time the Dyspnea Society came today was in Montreal, but the next time the Dyspnea Society will gather will be in Lund, Sweden, and we hope that this event will add to the momentum, strengthening the community and carrying it forward into the next meeting. So over the next few days, we'll be tackling some of the central questions in dyspnea science, identifying today's key issues, exploring how discoveries translate across measurement, management, and mechanisms, and thinking about where the field is headed as new conceptual, clinical, and methodological shifts take shape. But at its heart, Dyspnea Forward is about the people. So for early career researchers, especially building collaboration across different scientific perspectives can be both exciting and challenging. This meeting was designed to make those connections easier, to help densify the networks of colleagues, mentors, and collaborators who make up the community. So we really want to exchange ideas, ask questions, create partnerships, and working together to grow the Dyspnea Society. So before we get started, just a few quick notes on how the webinar will run. We initially encouraged you to keep the cameras on, but this is not something we were able to do. So whenever you'll want to ask a question, you'll be able to activate your camera, only keep your audio on. So you will remain muted during presentation, but as I just said, you be unmuted to ask Q&A. You can also use a chat box. For the questions and discussion, our moderator will curate or use, he'll curate the Q&A. And you can use the raise hand function if you prefer ask your question live. And above all, we'll ask you to help us maintain a collegial, respectful, and academic atmosphere throughout the event. So I'll be your host today, helping with transition and technical support. So not a Zoom expert, but we'll do our best to make this smooth. And I'm very happy to be a part of this webinar. And I'll really like to thank Naomi, Rachael, and Andrew for their trust and support, which have been invaluable throughout the preparation of this event. So the first scientific session of this webinar will be led by Prof. Rachael Evans, who will present the Society's ongoing efforts to develop a comprehensive statement on breathlessness, bringing together current knowledge, key themes, and future direction in dyspnea, research and clinical care. So it's my pleasure to introduce Prof. Evans, Professor of Respiratory Medicine at the University of Leicester and Honorary Consultant at the Glenfield Hospital. Professor Evans, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much. Just bear with me 30 seconds while I get my slides in the right format for you. That should work. Yeah, so thanks ever so much for the kind invitation to give you all an update on where we are with the dyspnea research statement. So just to be clear, we don't have all the results for you yet. And I'm presenting this on behalf of my co-chairs, Dr. Hayley Luthwaite from University of Newcastle, Australia, and Professor Magnus Ekstrom from Lund University. And there's a group of 20 or so of us that have been working hard on this to date. And just to set the scene, and really for the whole meeting, not just this work, that we're really all here because of that lived experience of breathlessness that patients tell us about as clinicians day in, day out. These are some quotes. I don't think it matters what the disease is from where this data originated. This is what people say about breathlessness. I never seem to have any breath when I try and do things. It makes you very frightened. And from a carer, can't do a thing. We don't talk about it, but I do what has to be done. And I think all too commonly we see this scenario. So we're looking at the Dyspnea Society to try and help whatever we can to try and improve this. Now, this is a bit of a dry slide, but just so that we've got a few facts and figures in there about the problem of breathlessness. It's really common when population studies have been doing, usually using the MRC scale. 1 in 10 adults report some degree of exertional breathlessness, and that increases to 1 in 3 in the elderly. And this isn't going away. It's very likely to be increasing due to aging, socioeconomic status, and the COVID pandemic has definitely provided a new source of people with breathlessness with long COVID. When people have done research to ask, well, what do patients want their clinicians to be prioritising? It's please help me with this symptom. It's associated with significant morbidity and mortality, and also huge health equities. I think we're only really scratching the surface about what exactly they are and what we can do about them. Now, if that's not enough to make the healthcare system or your policymakers do enough about breathlessness, it's also got an economic burden, and this is largely hidden underneath the disease-specific burdens, but it's associated with unemployment, sickness absence, lower productivity. In the UK alone, 1.2 billion is lost due to work days lost from breathlessness. And we know it's associated with high healthcare costs. It's one of the leading causes of hospital admissions acutely. But still, in clinical care, clinical teaching, clinical care services, guidelines tend to all be very disease focused rather than symptom based. And although disease-based treatments are important, they rarely ameliorate that symptom of breathlessness. And I think sometimes clinicians aren't always aware of that. So in order to develop new effective treatments, the science really needs a symptom-based approach. And I feel a bit hypocritical, well, not hypocritical, I feel like I'm preaching to the converted because there's a long history because of the Dyspnea Society and where it originated from of recognizing that you need an interdisciplinary approach to the science in order to get new treatments to patients. And the first statement was published in 1999, accepted in 1998 from the ATS, which then would, I think, the Dyspnea Society, not I think, the Dyspnea Society definitely existed prior to this, and I think many of the members are members of the Dyspnea Society. And there's a summary, just a snapshot of what that statement led to. And it was a really nice summary of different mechanisms, different approaches, and different treatments. This was then updated in 2012, again through the ATS, but working with the International Dyspnea Society on the mechanisms, assessment and management of dyspnea. They've highlighted three key things: that the progress in the treatment of dyspnea had not matched the progress with where we were with finding those underlying mechanisms. Again, highlighting this critical need for interdisciplinary translational research to connect those mechanisms with clinical treatment, and the need to validate dyspnea measures as patient-reported outcomes for clinical trials. So, in a separate piece of work, I just wanted to draw your attention to a piece of work done in the UK with the James Lind Alliance around a priority setting partnership. And this was done through very robust methodology to get to the top 10 joint patient and clinician research questions for breathlessness, which will feed into this statement. We had a steering group, that's a picture of us on the left, and then a day where we actually had to get from 25 questions down to just a mere 10. And again, they've got very strict methodology with how we do that. And thousands of people, patients, clinicians, carers, all were involved in the online surveys to get the original questions, and then those refined down to 25, and then this group to get it down to 10. And very broadly, the four key areas were providing better direct support for people living with breathlessness, how the health service can help people with breathlessness treatments that work for all, and understanding how to prevent and treat breathlessness. So the need, why do we need another research statement? Well, I think the 2012 statement clearly gave a lovely push that there were some gaps to be filled. And pre-1998, I would say there were lots of these little pieces of the jigsaw, but we really didn't particularly know how to combine them around what dyspnea management looked like for patients. In 2012, I would say that statement really started to put together the pieces to try and think where we should be directing the next research. And then hopefully we're going to draw a beautiful painting of the Mona Lisa by putting it all together into this statement. So we've put together a very wide-ranging team, patients front and centre. We've got neurophysiologists, respiratory physiologists, exercise physiologists, psychologists, physiotherapists, physicians, nurses, pulmonary rehabilitation specialists, a good group of early career researchers, some methodologists, and I should have librarians in plural that have really helped with the searches. We cover 4 different continents. We weren't successful to get this approved by the ATS, but the International Dyspnea Society have taken us under their wing, so we will be doing this as part of the Dyspnea Society. And Lancet Respiratory Medicine have agreed to review the final output. That doesn't mean that they've agreed to accept it, but at least we have a home for review. And we're hoping to get all of this work done by the end of 2025, and we are on target to do that. So broadly, the aims of this statement would be to provide researchers and healthcare professionals a summary of a critical evaluation of the recent research advancements on dyspnea, some of you presenting some of your work today, on the mechanisms, measurement and management approaches, and absolutely critically to synthesize and identify those research gaps to target research on dyspnea over the next 10 years. And we're hoping that will then signal to important funding bodies where research resources need to be placed to reduce those health inequalities and improve the clinical care and the lives of people living with dyspnea and their carers. I just want to be really clear that this is not a clinical practice guideline, so we won't be making recommendations for clinical care. And this is where we are. So Hayley is leading mechanisms, Magnus is leading measurement, and I'm leading the management side of things before I saw the volume of the references that we needed to screen. So we've taken a really broad systematic search, because we really wanted to make sure that we weren't just assuming that as experts we all knew what the literature was showing us. So it's a huge volume of hours that the team have put to eventually get to 386 articles for the mechanisms, 178 for the measurement, and 1210 for the management. And we're literally in the process now. We've got 3 smaller subgroups that are taking on each piece of work. Everyone's gone through all of those texts and decided the ones that are most relevant, as we're only allowed 100 references to be in the main article. For the mechanisms, there was an awful lot done in the first 2 statements, and if you've not given those a good read, I really would go back and urge you. They're a brilliant synthesis of where we are mechanistically with breathlessness. So this time the group are focusing on the neurophysiological mechanisms, and then we're hoping to then layer on where the management is, where there's a disconnect, and really try and use a personalised medicine approach throughout the document. This table is not supposed to be synthesized. I'm just giving an example of where the measurement group are. They've got all these different outcome measures, and they're looking at their properties, including the scoring systems, the focus period of the measurement tool, and really importantly, that minimum important difference to aid our interpretation. And hopefully this will enable us to, when we're doing clinical trials and for clinical care, to really select the optimal outcome measure. And then for management, as you saw, we still had this huge volume of full text with 1200. So we went through and actually removed any intervention where there was a disease-specific mechanism. So meaning a bronchodilator for people with asthma or COPD, or say a cardiac device that was only for somebody with a reduced left ventricular function. And we've also chosen to summarise the rehabilitation guidelines rather than going through all of those trials again, as there have been some big international synthesis of quite a lot of what's already available for pulmonary rehabilitation, and also using the ERS clinical practice guideline for respiratory serious illness. And here's a bit of a snapshot of all the different interventions, and there were things in there that I wasn't aware of. So again, I think it really does support doing a systematic search rather than relying on what we already know. So part of the new section for management will focus on diagnostic pathways, so how people present to healthcare with breathlessness and then what happens to them, so that we can try and get the correct diagnosis, and also be trying to put the message forward that that diagnosis isn't just a disease base. It needs to incorporate treatable traits that these therapeutic options then target. So for 2025, we're in the process of getting the full drafts of the subsections written, and they're all in a good state. They're to be combined and shortened in September 2025, so we'll have a full draft in the late autumn. We're all ready to submit by December of this year. And as I've said, we're really trying to get that personalised medicine approach throughout the document, and hopefully that will lead towards some future perfect clinical trials with perfect outcomes, and really trying to address that massive clinical gap that we have when looking for targeted treatment for breathlessness. And then we'll hopefully be able to at least present some of that work at the Dyspnea conference that Félix mentioned right at the beginning. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Evans. So the floor is now open for questions. So you can either raise your hand or type in the Q&A if you have any burning question. moderators and panelists are also welcome to go for questions.
I can take it, Felix. Oh, Richard, you let me down. I was about to say that I've covered it all so succinctly and beautifully that there weren't any questions. But Richard.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. And your leadership in this group has been really outstanding, and I thank you for that. With respect to some of the question about disease-specific treatment, I, th I think the issue there is that our disease-specific treatments aren't that effective in many ways, and for chronic diseases at least. And so you think about obstructive lung disease or interstitial lung disease, it doesn't work well. You have acute pulmonary edema and you fix the heart failure, the shortness of breath, does get better. So there's that. And then the other issue, which I think is complicated in our respiratory patients, and maybe we should think about putting more of this into the statement as well, is that you start out with one disease. And for me, the classic would be, say, COPD, right? And then you don't exercise because you're afraid of shortness of breath and so forth. And then you become deconditioned, cardiovascular deconditioned. And that's actually the limiting factor for you, not your COPD at some point. And having run a rehab program for a dozen years or so, that was where we made our greatest interventions. And I think we may want to talk about those kinds of things, as well in this statement, which I don't think were addressed all that well in the prior statements. This notion of evolving from one problem to another based on the disease state and reactions to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that's taking that treatable traits approach as well, isn't it? And making sure that those disease mechanisms are summarized in the introduction for those that aren't necessarily being covered in the mechanisms again. But yeah, points well taken. Thank you. And as far as the leadership, though, I really do have to tip my hat to Hayley because she's really done a super job with us all. And she just happens not to be able to be here. Otherwise, she would have done the presenting.